With all the controversy swirling around, we'll ask exactly where does Islanders general manager Lou Lamoriello rank among New York area GMs? Plus, how do we get the Islanders out of the muddy middle? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs are in our rearview mirror in the NHL and NBA. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lots to discuss on today's show, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long during the offseason. That includes hirings, firings, trade rumors, the draft, and free agency. If it's happening to the New York Islanders, we'll have it for you here on the Locked On Islanders podcast. And it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. So there was some controversy in the last few days in the New York metropolitan area where some hosts of a local radio station were ranking the 9 GMs of the big 4 sports in the New York area. So that's the Mets and Yankees in baseball, the Jets and Giants in football, the Nets and Knicks in the NBA, and then, of course, the Devils, the Rangers, and the Islanders in the NHL. So basically speaking, there was this ranking going on. And Sean Morash, who is admittedly not an Islanders fan, is a Rangers guy, but he ranked Lou Lamoriello 8th out of the 9 GMs in the New York metropolitan area, with only the Yankees' Brian Cashman coming in below him. And Evan Roberts, who is an Islanders fan, did defend Lou, but trying to figure out sort of where you rank Lou Lamoriello. And to me, it really depends. I think putting Lou 8th out of 9 may be a little harsh, especially when you consider the lack of success that some of these other teams have had. And you remember that no New York metropolitan area has won a championship in more than a decade now, as far as those big 4 sports are concerned. And look, let's face it, I have been critical, everydayers, I have been critical of Lou Lamoriello in many instances. And to me, the big issue with Lou is not any individual big moves that he made. I mean, if you break down, for example, we talked about the fact that for 4 years in a row, Lou Lamoriello traded away the Islanders' first-round draft pick. And I basically believe if you're doing that, if you're trading away your first-round draft pick for 4 years straight, you should be a team that needs one or two more players to get to that elite level and compete for a championship. And yet the Islanders have sort of remained in the so-called muddy middle, where this team on paper is good enough to make the playoffs barely or miss the playoffs barely. But if they're going to do better than that, it's going to be as a result of a hot streak at the right time with a lot of upsets. So you break down the 4 picks, the 4 trades, for example, that Lou Lamoriello made for the Islanders, where, 4 years in a row. Okay, if you break them down all individually, they're not horrible. I mean, you added in those 4 picks, J.G. Pageau, Kyle Palmieri, Alexander Romanov, and Bo Horvat. All 4 of those players have become big parts of the New York Islanders and have contributed to the Islanders' success. Palmieri, solid second-line winger when healthy. Not always healthy, kind of streaky, but, 30-goal guy this past year. Romanov, second pair or top 4 defenseman, growing into his role as a solid defenseman who occasionally flashes a little offensive ability. J.G. Pageau, again, been a key penalty killer, been a solid third-line addition. Now, his offensive production has dropped off in each of the last 3 seasons, and the contract that Lou signed him to after acquiring him has not aged well. But you can't deny that Pageau has been a contributor in the season since he was acquired. And then Bo Horvat, your first-line center, 30-goal scorer this past year. Great chemistry with Matthew Barzal. So the trades in and of themselves, it's not like he acquired a guy who was terrible and just did not pan out in any way for the team. My issues with Lou Lamoriello is just that he doesn't manage the cap well, does not get good value on the contracts he signs, and I don't object to any of the individual trades he made that dealt with dealing a first-round draft pick. But the issue for me is, if you're going to trade away 4 first-round draft picks in a row, you should not be in the muddy middle. Or, to be more specific, those trades should get you out of the muddy middle and put you in the ranks of teams that are legitimate contenders for the Stanley Cup. So, you could talk to me about the 2 runs to the Stanley Cup Conference Finals in 2020 and 2021. And they were exciting and they were great runs. But in both of those instances, the Islanders, look, in 2020, had COVID not struck, the Islanders, if the season ended then and they didn't extend the number of playoff teams, the Islanders wouldn't have made it. And in 2021, again, the Islanders barely made the playoffs, and each of the series wins that they had were upsets. And yes, those 2 playoff runs were exciting, and they were energizing, and they were great. And since Lou Lamoriello has taken over as GM, he has only missed the playoffs once. But this team has not won a playoff round now in the last 3 seasons, missing once and being eliminated handily in the first round twice. And again, when it comes to draft and develop, when it comes to planning for the future, that's where I rank Lou Lamoriello lower. Realistically, other than Noah Dobson in recent years, there have not been a lot of players that were drafted and developed by the Islanders who have become major contributors to this team. And some of the contracts that Lou has signed just don't make sense when it comes to length of the contract, the player that you're signing to a contract, and then the modified or full no trade clauses given out. So to me, this team has made the playoffs right now. Every year but one since Lou Lamoriello took over. They've gone on 2 playoff runs, won a series in one other year, and then were eliminated in 2. So 5 out of 6 playoff appearances, won a series in at least 3 of those years. But as far as building this team for the future and thinking long term, my criticism of Lou Lamoriello has always been he is more of a guy who is putting out fires, and very often fires that he set or created, rather than a guy who has a long-term plan of how to make this team a true contender. And so my fault with Lou lies in the fact that he keeps this team in the muddy middle, rather than saying this core has done as much as it can do, and if I'm going to get this team to be a true contender, I may have to struggle for a couple of years, make some deals, get younger, faster, more skilled, and then become a real contender. That's my knock. So I would put Lou more in the middle, where I think some of the individual moves he made as far as trades go are not horrible. In fact, you can argue they've been successful more than they have not been. But his overall long-term plan for this team is lacking in foresight. The draft and develop aspect of things and the free agency aspect of things have not been good. And I just feel like the planning is not as good as it should be for this hockey team's long-term health. But, that being said, he's been more successful. The Islanders have been more successful than both the Giants and the Jets in recent years. Certainly more successful than the Devils, although that, the way the Devils are built could change. Certainly more successful than the Mets for most of the last 5 or 6 years. Again, I would put Lou and the Islanders somewhere in the middle of the 9 GMs that we're talking about. Not certainly not at the top, but certainly not at the very bottom. And, these are sort of questions that fans are going to answer, and we're going to put a poll up on our YouTube page where you can vote on where you would rank Lou Lamoriello. We have got more to get to. We've talked about the Islanders being in the muddy middle. How do they get out of it? We're going to talk about that. Plus, Maxim Tsyplakov, who the Islanders signed, is going to be the ultimate wild card for this team this year. We're going to give you a little bit better picture of what to expect from Tsyplakov later on. And for our Islanders birthday of the day, a forward who was with the Islanders for part of one season in the early 2010s. Let's see if you can guess who that is. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of Locked On Islanders will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So how do you get out of the muddy middle if you're the New York Islanders? It's a big problem for this team, and it's something that they really need to do because, again, you look at the roster and, Anders Lee, Brock Nelson, Kyle Palmieri, J.G. Pageau, Casey Cizikas, all on the wrong side right now, quote unquote, of 30. Scott Mayfield, Mike Riley, all over 30. And then you got guys like Ryan Pollock, Adam Pelech, Bo Horvat. They're all 29 years old, as is Hudson Fasching. Semyon Varlamov also over 30. This team is getting old, and as we know, the prospect pool, while better this year since the drafting of Cole Yzerman, still not elite. But here's the deal. We know that the cap is going up next offseason, barring something catastrophic. And you're losing the contracts of the following people: Brock Nelson, Kyle Palmieri, Hudson Fasching, Mike Riley, again a UFA, Samuel Bolduc, and Alexander Romanov and Noah Dobson will be RFAs. So will Simon Holmstrom, and if he's still around, Oliver Wahlstrom. The point is that gives you a lot more cap space. And depending on where the Islanders are in the standings this coming season, where we expect the Islanders to again be one of those teams somewhere in between 6th and 10th in the Eastern Conference, where they're most likely either going to be a wild card team or just out of the playoffs. But again, if you're out of the playoffs, you could start talking about trading away guys like Kyle Palmieri at the trade deadline to try to free up some cap space and get younger, faster, and more skilled players. And add to that the idea that guys like J.G. Pageau and Anders Lee, who remain contributors in this lineup, although nowhere near what their respective salary cap hits are. Lee, you're paying him $7 million a year. Pageau, $5 million. They still have 2 years left on their deal, this year and then 2025, 2026. But that means they are easier to either trade or buy out at this year's trade deadline, at the draft next year, or in next off season, where you get that buyout window if you can't find a trading partner for them. And you may want to re-sign a guy like Brock Nelson, but again, you kind of got to figure out where this team is. Because if the Islanders are retooling, maybe signing Brock Nelson to anything more than a short-term deal doesn't make sense, and trading him might make more sense. Again, all of these things are ways to get back prospects, picks, players who could contribute even at the NHL level right away, and to free up cap space. So to me, Pageau and Lee, buying them out or trading them next year, you could free up to $12 million more in cap space. And yeah, you're going to have to pay Noah Dobson and Alexander Romanov if you want to keep them. You can give them a 2-year bridge deal before they reach unrestricted free agency. But I think, if I'm Dauber, especially, I'm going to want that $8-9 million contract. Romanov is going to be worth at least $5 or $6 million. You got to sort of make these value judgments But I think after this year is really when the Islanders have a legitimate chance to remake this team with smart trades, smart re-signings or non-re-signings. And if you can't make trades, maybe even possibly a buyout or two. This next year, the next, let's say, 14 months is really when Lou Lamoriello, or if Lou does, step down at the end of next season, his successor, that's when you're going to earn your money. These next 14 months are really going to be very critical for this Islanders franchise, because if they want to get out of the muddy middle with the cap going up, with some big salaries possibly coming off the books, or making it easier to trade some of these bad contracts, or even the end of some no trade clauses that may become modified no trade clauses on the horizon. These are your opportunities from an Islanders perspective to get out of the muddy middle. And I think it is important for the GM, whoever it is, whether it's Lou or somebody else, to understand that it may require taking a step or two back to take 2 or 3 steps forward. That is critical to the long-term picture for this team. I don't think this team needs a complete rebuild. That's not what I'm saying. But it may need a retool, and it may need some adjustments, and it may take a year or two to make those adjustments. But you got to get out of the muddy middle, because that is the last place any NHL team wants to be long-term. It's okay for a year or two. The Islanders have been there far too long, and it's time to clean that up. And next offseason, starting at the trade deadline this year through the start of next season in 2025, 2026, is going to be the most critical time for this franchise, and will go a long way toward determining whether the Islanders become a bad team, stick in the muddy middle, or are able to become contenders. And good management is going to be critical to that process. All right, we've got more to get to on today's show. We're going to talk a little bit more about Maxim Tsyplakov, where he's going to fit in, plus our Islanders birthday of the day. We've got all this and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But with the NBA playoffs and the Stanley Cup playoffs far in our rearview mirror now, there are fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. You've got baseball going on right now. Met fan, Yankee fan, check out all the latest odds. You've got preseason football back in action. And how about hockey futures and basketball futures? All of them there, plus the summer games in Paris. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, and providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NHL in the description, so you don't need to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So one addition that the Islanders made this offseason, other than Anthony Duclair, who is going to be critical, is Maxim Tsyplakov. And Tsyplakov is going to be critical. He's the wild card for the Islanders heading into this season. We do not know how last year his 31 goals and 47 points in 65 games in the KHL with Moscow Spartak is going to translate to the NHL. Now, Tsyplakov is 6'2", about 190 pounds. He's got good size, and that's always important. He is not afraid to get into those dirty areas and fight for, time and space. So that is very, very good. Now, he had a breakout season last year with the 31 goals. Before that, he never had more than 10 in any season. And his shooting percentage went way up. It really kind of went up to 18%, whereas previously it had been half that, 9%. And, sometimes you could say the guy just got lucky. He got on a hot streak, whatever you want to say. But there are reasons to think that this is Tsyplakov's, breakout season, and that while he may not score 30 in the NHL, he's certainly capable of putting up 15 to 20 as a rookie, and then more after that. And he has to make an adjustment. And that adjustment essentially involves, playing in the narrower rinks of the NHL, adjusting to the style of play in the NHL, and just living in the United States and in the New York metropolitan area where there are a lot of Russian-speaking people, and he's got Russian teammates in Romanov and Sorokin and Varlamov, plenty of Russian speakers on this team. But still, moving to a different country to work requires an adjustment period. So to me, if Tsyplakov can get between 15 and 20 goals, I think he starts the season on the third line and probably moves up to the second if he's playing well enough. That would be success, and then you build on that going forward. Historically, Russian players have had mixed results coming over from the KHL to the NHL. To me, the most encouraging thing about it, though, is this. There were about a dozen other NHL teams battling to sign Maxim Tsyplakov, and he signed with the Islanders. So let's hope that all of those scouts from all of those teams weren't wrong in what they saw in Tsyplakov. All right, time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And we are a day early with this, but Tuesday will be the 40th birthday of former Islanders forward Tim Wallace. Wallace, a native of Anchorage, Alaska, 6'1", 206 pounds, undrafted, spent 4 years at Notre Dame, and then made his NHL debut with the Penguins in 2008-2009. Joined the Islanders in the 2011-2012 season, split time between Bridgeport and the big club. 31 games with the Islanders, had an assist, 6 penalty minutes, and was a -7. Later played for the Lightning and the Hurricanes before finishing his career in Europe. And he retired after the 2018-2019 season. Played in 101 career NHL games, 4 goals, 13 points, and 45 penalty minutes. One of his better games with the Islanders, December 6, 2011, the Tampa Bay Lightning invading the old barn, the Nassau Coliseum. Matthew Guerin, the goalie for Tampa Bay. Al Montoya, Il Cubano, the goalie for the Islanders. And in this game, our Islanders birthday of the day, Tim Wallace assists on a goal by Matt Martin late in the first period to give the Islanders a 2-1 lead. Marty Reisner gets the secondary assist. That turned out to be the game-winning goal in a game that the Islanders won by a score of 5-1. For Tim Wallace, he was on the ice for 9 minutes, 37 seconds. He had the assist. He was a +2. And again, his first and only point as an Islander coming with an assist on the game-winning goal. So happy 40th birthday to Tim Wallace. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, we will be back Wednesday with the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings. Again, anything happening with Oliver Wahlstrom, we will let you know. We're going to start reviewing Islanders draft picks, give you a little bit more on the scouting report on them, and discuss, what their long-term prospects are for making the NHL and how they'll fit in. So make sure you join us throughout the offseason for that. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On Islanders podcast. Oh, and of course, let's go Islanders.